Provisional sum, basically an estimate of the cost of carrying out particular work. The estimate includes the cost of supplying any materials needed for the work. So provisional sum is basically the cost of supplying any material that's required for that. It's basically an estimate is required if, after making all reasonable inquiries, the builder cannot give a definite amount for the item at the time the contract is entered into. So if there's something that's unclear and an estimate is required, that's what a provisional sum is. For example, when estimating for earthworks and excavation at the beginning of a job, the builder can work out a fairly good estimate of the amount of money required for the job without knowing what is actually under the ground. So, however, it is possible to be absolutely certain about the final costs, as it is based on rates. If the total volume or metric cube of rock excavated was greater than the estimated amount, then the increase in cost is based on the rate stipulated in the contract. So these any difference between the provisional sum listed in the contract and the actual cost is paid by the client. This in effect changes the contract price. So example, white goods or light fittings. So if you haven't decided on the particular brand or the particular model of all the white goods that you're going to use, so they provide a sum for it. They say I've allowed $600 for a bathtub, for example, or I've allowed $400 for example, a new cooking range, for example. And if it doesn't come in that range, then the client has to foot the extra bill. Prime cost items. Prime cost item is an allowance in the contract for the supply of necessary items not yet finally selected, or for which the contractor is unable to give a definite price at the time the contract is signed, despite making reasonable inquiries. For example, tiles, landscaping, taps, doors, furniture, etc. Clause that states that all works will comply with Building Code of Australia, so that clause has to be in your building contract. All definitions, keywords and phrases, implied warranties and necessary insurances. The contractor acknowledges that the site is suitable for the proposed work and has obtained foundation data and soil report. It is their responsibility to satisfy themselves that the foundation data is accurate. So you don't want your builder to actually turn on you and say, look, the soil is no good for building, and then or something else comes up, or they find rocks under the soil and they can't build. So all these issues come into picture. So make sure that the builder is actually seeing the soil report and they say yes, the site's good for building. Important, you must have a contract date. The day the contract is signed by both parties, it is actually different from the construction commencement date. So remember that. And in provisional sum and prime cost, in both cases, an allowance will be made for the cost of the prime cost or provisional sum. If amount allowed is greater than cost, then owner gets a credit, and if amount allowed is less than cost, then the contractor can charge a margin on the cost exceeding the allowance, and this margin must be stated in the contract. So the whole idea of having provisional costs and all that is because all these things can become part of the building contract, so that there's no confusion towards the end.